sick bastard, you heartless piece of filth. I don't even know what to call you anymore because no human being does something like this. No one with a beating heart could hang two tiny living souls from a tree like trash. If there's a hell, you've already got your place reserved there. I've seen things most people never should: car wrecks, house fires, scenes that burn into your mind forever. But what I saw that day on that soaked dirt road just outside Millfield, Texas, that was the one that froze my blood. The sky was heavy with clouds, thunder grumbling somewhere far off. I'd just finished my delivery shift and decided to take the shortcut through the woods. I'd driven that narrow road hundreds of times before: wild grass shoulder high on both sides, the air thick with wet earth and pine sap after the rain. Quiet enough to hear your own heartbeat or the hum of an engine miles away. Then I heard something else, not clear, not loud, somewhere between the wind and a moan, faint, drawn out like a dying breath. I stopped the truck. My pulse spiked hard. Every instinct in me said something was wrong. I stepped out. Rain slapped cold against my face, my boots sinking into mud. The sound came again, this time clearer, a raspy whimper, then silence. I pushed through the wet weeds, and when I saw them, I swear my heart stopped. Two Doberman puppies, couldn't be more than 2 months old, hung from a low branch by an old rope. Their bodies were so small, the wind made them sway. Deep red marks circled their necks, fur-soaked skin clinging to bone. One still had its eyes open, staring straight at me. No sound, just a trembling breath like it was asking, "What did I do wrong?" I went numb. Then fury hit fast, violent, burning through my chest. "You piece of garbage! What kind of human are you?" I shouted into the emptiness. No one answered, only the branch creaked in the wind, rainwater running dark down the bark, pooling red in the mud. That sight, God help me, it felt like a knife driven straight into my soul. I pulled the hunting knife from my pocket and cut the rope. The little body dropped into my hands, weightless as ash. I was afraid to even hold it too tightly, afraid it would break. Its heart still beat slow, faint. But there. I cut the second one loose, gathered them both against my chest, trying to share whatever warmth I had left. "It's okay, baby. You're safe now. I've got you." The rain came harder. I threw open the truck door, wrapped them in my thick jacket, cranked the heater and hit the gas. The dirt road turned slick under the tires' headlights slicing through the gray curtain of rain. My hands shook as I drove, glancing at the two small bodies on the seat beside me, so tiny they barely filled my palms. One of them stirred weakly, licking my finger as if to say it was still here. "Stay with me. Don't you dare give up." I grabbed my phone and called Dr. Laura Kim, the vet in Maple Ridge. My voice broke tight with fear and rage. "Dr. Kim, it's Evan Walker. I've got 2 Doberman pups. They've been hanged strangled. Can you prep the emergency room? Oh my God, Evan. Hurry, I'll meet you at the door." I hung up and floored it. Rain lashed the windshield like a whip. The tires spun through puddles, the engine roared, angry for me. I didn't know if they'd make it, but I knew one thing. No one, not even death, was taking these pups while I was still breathing. A flash of lightning lit my reflection in the glass eyes, red beard, soaked, breath ragged. I've seen loss before, but never this kind of rage, this kind of hurt. If I hadn't taken that road today by morning, there'd be 2 dead puppies swinging in the wind under that tree. No, not a chance. I pressed the pedal harder. The Texas rain came down like it wanted to wash away someone's sin, but I knew some stains never come clean. The 2 tiny bodies trembled inside my jacket, eyes closed, breaths thin as thread. I kept one hand on the wheel, whispering under my breath, "Hold on, little ones, we're not done. I promise this story doesn't end here." And through the blur of storm and headlights, the glowing sign of Maple Ridge Vet Care appeared ahead, shining faint but steady in the rain. That light, small defiant felt like a promise that maybe, just maybe tonight, those two souls would get their chance to live again. Fan 2. My name is Evan Walker. 39 years old. Former firefighter. Once they even called me a hero. But these days I'm just a delivery guy driving through small Texas towns, Millfield, mostly hauling water livestock feed and whatever farm supplies people order. I used to run into burning buildings to pull people out. Now I cross the street when I smell smoke. The scent makes my heart race every time I see his face again. The one I couldn't save. That fire in Wichita took my brother in arms and left me with nothing but silence. So I moved to the edge of town, rented a weathered old cabin 2 miles past the gas station where the nights are filled with crickets and the yellow light of a single porch bulb. I live alone. No friends, no family. No one is asking if I'm doing okay. Probably no one would notice if I wasn't. I still wake up early, still drive my route, still trade polite smiles with ranch owners. Then I go home, heat up canned food, and listen to the same static-filled radio. People call that peace, but really, it's just another kind of numbness. Until that afternoon. That forest road I take every day, the shortcut everyone calls boring. As death turned out to be the place where I found the last piece of myself that was still human. I remember exactly what it felt like holding those 2 Doberman puppies after cutting them down. My heart pounded like it used to when the alarm rang back at the firehouse. Memories I'd buried, deep explosions, collapsing roofs, someone screaming, "Help!" all came flooding back. But this time it wasn't people who needed saving. It was 2 trembling, weightless lives still trying to breathe when the whole world had already given up on them. One thought hit me hard and clear. Maybe God was giving me one more chance to save someone, even if it was just 2 puppies. I never believed in signs, but if they exist, that day was the clearest one I'd ever seen. Because if I'd been 10 minutes later, they wouldn't have been there to look at me. The rain poured like vengeance, the woods heavy with the smell of wet earth and scorched grass. My headlights cut through the falling water strands of light, connecting me to the fragile things still alive inside my jacket. And in that glow I saw myself in the mirror, drenched, shaken, but with something in my eyes I hadn't seen in years. Something I thought was gone. The belief that saving one life, no matter how small, might just save my own. When I reached the clinic, I jumped out of the truck, clutching the pups tight against my chest. The door flew open, harsh white light spilling out, and Dr. Laura Kim's voice broke through the storm. "Dear God, Evan, what happened?" All I could say was they were hung from a tree. Her face went pale. She motioned to 2 vet techs to pull out the emergency table. Every movement was fast, precise, like the old rescue drills from my firehouse days. I stood there shaking, feeling like my strength had been drained away. The world blurred around me. All I could hear was the beeping of the heart monitor, the rasp of 2 small lungs, and the relentless hammer of rain against the glass. I don't know how long I stood there, but I remember Dr. Kim's hand resting gently on my shoulder. "There's hope, Evan. They still have reflexes. Faint, but there." I nodded, rain and tears mixing on my face. I watched their tiny bodies fighting for air, every breath. Shallow, trembling. And I knew that if they were still fighting, then so would I. That night I sat in the hallway outside the exam room. My clothes were soaked and cold. My hands still smelled of wet rope and fur. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that branch again, 2 small shapes swaying in the wind, rain slapping my face. And I couldn't help but wonder, how far has this world fallen that someone could do something like that, and not even flinch? I didn't have an answer. But I knew one thing for sure: I wouldn't let their story end in the hands of whoever did it. If I only get to do one right thing for the rest of my life, then this night, this fight is it. Fan 3. I had never seen the emergency room lights so blinding. They reflected off the white walls and glared down on two tiny, trembling bodies lying on a cold steel table. The smell of alcohol, rain, and iron mixed together the scent of the thin line between life and death. Dr. Kim pulled on her gloves, her voice firm. "Evan, I need you to hold this one's head still. Don't let her thrash. Her heart's barely hanging on." I nodded, hands shaking as I supported the small neck wrapped in gauze. Under the surgical light, the dark bruises around it showed deep and raw, seeping, but no longer bleeding. I could hear the raspy sound of breath, faint, so faint I had to lean in to catch it. The other pup lay inside a thermal blanket, a thin IV tube inserted into a leg no thicker than my finger. Dr. Kim spoke quickly, focused. "Pulse is weak. Severe hypothermia. Administering epinephrine, tracking heart rate." Will they make it?" I asked, my voice cracking. "I don't know," she said without looking up from the monitor. "But they're still fighting. That means they haven't lost yet." The heart monitor suddenly beeped, slow, uneven. A jolt ran through me. I bent down and whispered, "Hey, little one, you hear me? You can't give up. Understand, I've already lost too much. I'm not losing anyone else." Maybe it wasn't my imagination. That small body twitched, lifted its head ever so slightly, then dropped again. But the heartbeat steadied a little. Dr. Kim glanced over and gave a brief nod. "Good, hold it there. He's listening to you." The rain outside hadn't stopped. Thunder rolled off into the distance, replaced by the low hum of the heater. I sat there, eyes locked on those two fragile lives, my hand resting gently on their chests, feeling warmth return in tiny waves. My mind was empty, except for one thought: don't let them die alone. Dr. Kim placed a hand on my shoulder, her voice softening. "You know, Evan, I've seen hundreds of cases over the years. Abandonment, abuse chains, burns, but none of them have made me want to cry like tonight." "They're only 2 months old," I murmured, eyes still fixed on the one struggling to breathe. 2 months, and already they've learned to be afraid. That sentence cut straight through me. I remembered their eyes when I cut the ropes. No anger, no resistance, just quiet acceptance. Like they'd already decided that humans were born to hurt them. I swallowed hard and whispered, like a vow, "No, not again. Not while I'm here." 2 hours later, the room grew still. The heart monitor's rhythm had steadied. One puppy lay motionless, breathing deep and even. The other twitched slightly, then relaxed. Dr. Kim leaned back, pulled off her gloves, and exhaled. "They're stable. I think they'll make it through the night." I almost collapsed into the chair. The tension that had been strangling me for hours finally drained with a long breath. I looked at the two small shapes wrapped in blankets, rising and falling gently as if sleeping. "Do they have names yet?" Dr. Kim asked. "Not yet. I thought I'd wait until morning." "All right. For now, just call them the fighters. Your two little warriors." I smiled for the first time in what felt like forever. A real smile. I stood, walked to the table, and brushed my fingers across their heads. "Fighters," I whispered. "Rest now. Tomorrow's a new start." Outside, I stepped under the awning. The rain had stopped, leaving only mist drifting in the cool night air. The streetlights cast soft reflections over the wet pavement. I looked up at the pale gray sky, clutching my jacket still covered with strands of fur and dried blood. I thought about the person who did this, someone cruel enough to hang 2 innocent souls and walk away like they were nothing. And it hit me that the worst thing in this world isn't cruelty. It's indifference. It's seeing pain and choosing to keep walking. I used to be that person after the fire. I kept walking. But tonight those 2 tiny dogs pulled me back. When Dr. Kim opened the door to call me inside, I turned and looked through the glass one last time. The little fighters were still there, breathing steady beneath their blankets. The soft light above them glowed like redemption itself, and I knew from this moment on I couldn't go back to the empty life I had before. I couldn't just be a lonely delivery man pretending not to care. Because tonight, in that small bright room, I saw life crawl back from the edge of despair. And I understood saving them might just be how I save what's left of my own heart. Fan 4. That night, Maple Ridge Vet Care didn't sleep. The white light flooded the small clinic, glinting off cold metal trays and my shaking hands. Outside, the rain had stopped. Only the wind howled through the cracks of the door, carrying the damp scent of earth. But inside, everything was strung tight because the lives of those two tiny souls still hung by the thinnest thread. Dr. Kim slipped her lab coat back on, tying her hair into a quick knot. She glanced at the clock, her voice low but urgent. "They're stabilizing, but they're not out of danger. We need to keep fluids going, monitor blood pressure, and maintain body heat." I stood beside her, my hand still resting on the smaller one's fragile chest. I didn't know a thing about medicine, only that my hands were trembling but stayed steady where they needed to. Every small breath that rose under my palm felt like a victory. "What can I do?" I asked. "Stay right there," Dr. Kim said. "They seem calmer when you talk. Your voice steadies their heart rate." I nodded, pulled up a stool, leaned in close. "Hey, little one, you did well. You made it through the darkest night." The smaller one, black and tan, weaker, blinked slowly, its tiny toes twitching when I touched them. The bigger one lay still, heart rhythm. And steady breathing, deeper now. The IV tube pulsed gently with each beat. I exhaled softly, afraid even my breath might wear them out. Dr. Kim handed me a paper cup of coffee. Its warmth seeped into my palms. "You know," she said, eyes fixed on the heart monitor, "people often ask why we do this. Why save creatures this small when there are so many people out there who need help? But you see, sometimes saving one small life is how we save what's left of our own humanity." I looked at her. Behind the foggy lenses, her eyes were tired but still bright. I gave a rough, hoarse laugh. I used to do something like that too, pulling people from fires. I just stopped believing in miracles, and yet she said, "You still ran into the storm to save 2 dogs." I didn't answer. Her words hit somewhere deep, someplace I'd locked away. Maybe she was right. Maybe I'd lost faith in people, but not enough to kill my compassion. Around 3 in the morning, something miraculous happened. The smaller one, the one I'd started calling Max, let out a faint whimper, then tried to roll over. The whole room froze. Dr. Kim bent down, checked the reflexes, and smiled softly. "He's awake." I couldn't believe it. I leaned closer, brushed a finger against his cheek. He opened his eyes, big, cloudy brown eyes, weak but alive, and then out of nowhere he licked my finger. Just one lick, but it nearly broke me. My throat tightened. I bit my lip to keep from sobbing. "Good boy, Max. That's my boy." Dr. Kim smiled, wiping a tear from my face with her gloved hand. "You just won a battle, Evan." The other pup, Rex, still lay still, but the color around his muzzle had warmed his breathing deeper. Dr. Kim adjusted the IV, murmuring, "He just needs time. If he makes it to sunrise, he'll make it, period." I stayed there all night watching the 2 little fighters sleeping beneath their blankets. There were long stretches of silence, just the steady beeping of the monitors, the soft rhythm of breathing, and my own quiet whispers. Half prayer, half promise. "Hang in there, you 2. I'm right here. We're going home. Okay?" Toward dawn, the first light crept through the clinic window, spilling across the small forms on the table. I had never seen light so beautiful. Not the light of morning, but the light of life coming back. Dr. Kim brought over 2 small bowls, warm milk and sugar water. Try giving Max a little. He's strong enough now. I lifted his head gently the way you'd cradle a newborn. He licked at it first, then began to drink slow, careful sips. I smiled as tears ran down my face faster than I could wipe them. God, he wants to live. Dr. Kim gathered her things, her voice weary but soft. You should get some rest, Evan. I'll watch them from here. They're safe now. No, I said, shaking my head. We started this night together. I'm not leaving until the sun's up. She looked at me for a moment, then nodded. All right, but when the sun rises, let yourself breathe again, Evan. I sat down on the floor beside the table, watching the 2 tiny lives sleep in peace. Outside, the rain had stopped completely. The golden light filtered through the glass, catching the lines on my tired face. For the first time in years, I felt alive. That morning, while Dr. Kim filled out the intake notes, I looked at the 2 pups and asked, Do you think they'll remember what happened? No, she said, smiling faintly, but they'll remember who was there when they needed someone, and that's all they need to heal. I nodded, brushed my hand gently over each of their heads. Then I'll be that someone. Fan 5. 3 days later, the Maple Ridge Vet Care Clinic had gone quiet, no more beeping monitors, just the soft, steady breathing of 2 tiny lives curled up together in a warm nest by the window. The early Texas sunlight streamed through the curtains, casting a glow on their black and tan coats, now dry, no longer matted like that first night. I still came every morning, not because anyone asked me to, but because my heart wouldn't let me stay home. Every time I walked through the door, Max was the first to lift his head, one ear twitching, while Rex, the quieter one, simply wagged his tail, eyes calm and steady in a way that always held me there a little longer. Morning, little warriors, I said, setting down 2 bowls of warm milk. Max crawled out right away, tongue brushing against my hand while Rex waited patient as ever for his brother to taste it first. I chuckled, voice catching slightly. Such a gentleman, Rex. Guess you're the refined one of the family. Dr. Kim stood at the doorway, arms crossed, smiling. They're improving every day. You know, at first I didn't think they'd make it. Me neither, I said, still watching them. But they're tougher than most people I've known. And they trust you more than they trust themselves, she replied. I spent the whole morning there telling them stories about rainy days, about delivery runs that nearly put me to sleep behind the wheel. My voice stayed calm, steady. I didn't have to try. Just talking seemed to make them still. Every so often, Max would lift his head, pressing his nose into my palm like he was saying, I'm still listening. Don't stop. That feeling, it was strange. It reminded me of the firehouse nights years ago when we'd sit in silence after a blaze, no words, just knowing the others were still alive. Now I understand you don't always need words, just presence. A week later, Max began walking around the room. Still limping a little, but the way he moved, confident head high, made the whole place feel brighter. Rex followed behind slower, but his eyes were different now. No longer afraid when someone came near. That day I brought them new collars, one blue, one red, both engraved in bright steel. I set them on the table like part of a ritual. From today, I said softly, you're Max, and you're Rex, my 2 little warriors. Dr. Kim smiled, snapping a photo. Her voice was gentle, warm. They have names now. That means they have a new beginning. As I leaned down to fasten the collars, Max licked my cheek once, and Rex rested his head against my arm, as if to say thank you. My chest tightened not from pain, but from the kind of fullness I hadn't felt in years. For the first time, I felt needed. In the days that followed, I came back every morning. I brought toys, towels, and the old jacket I'd used to wrap them that night. Max seemed to remember the smell. Every time he saw it, he'd drag it to the corner and curl up on it, rubbing his face against the fabric like it still made him feel safe. Dr. Kim said, That jacket, it's their memory. The smell of survival. I smiled, and for me, it's the smell of hope. On Thursday night, I came late. When I opened the door, Max came trotting over, tail wagging wildly. But Rex was different, lying quietly in the corner, head resting on my jacket, eyes wide like he'd been waiting. I knelt down and stroked his head. "Sorry, Rex, I'm late." He didn't move, just blinked slowly, then pressed his nose into my hand. And right then, I understood they weren't afraid anymore. They were just afraid of being left behind. I stayed until late, sitting beside them, flipping through a magazine. Dr. Kim passed by, noticed me still there, and said softly, "You know, some creatures only need one person to believe in them, and that's enough." I looked up and said, "Maybe people are the same." 2 weeks went by. Max could now run around the small yard behind the clinic. The Texas sun shone over his coat, sleek and strong again. Rex still stayed close beside his brother, careful with every step, but what I saw in him now was trust being reborn. I leaned against the doorway, a cup of hot coffee in hand, watching the two of them chase each other in the sunlight. It was a small kind of peace, but real enough that I had to take a deep breath to believe it. And when Max came running over carrying my old jacket in his mouth, dropping it at my feet like a gift, I couldn't help but laugh. "All right, little warrior, I get it. You chose me." That evening, as I was about to leave, Dr. Kim said, "Evan, if you'd like, I can start the adoption paperwork once they're fully recovered." I looked over at the two small figures sleeping in their nest, their chests rising and falling softly, their ears twitching with each breath. And I knew that decision had already been written in my heart since the night of the storm. "No need for paperwork, Doc," I said quietly. "I'll be here from now on, and for as long as they need me." And 6, that night, the wind changed. A sudden storm swept through Millfield, tearing the sky apart with blinding flashes of white lightning. Thunder cracked like cannon fire, shaking the windows in their frames. I was sitting in the living room reading the evening paper when I heard the first bark, sharp, choked, and then silence. I set the paper down, my chest tightening. Another thunderclap exploded over the roof. This time, a whimper followed, long, trembling, broken. I ran to the bedroom where Max and Rex always slept side by side. They were huddled in the corner, bodies pressed tight together, eyes wide open, breaths coming in quick bursts. That rope from that night, I knew instantly. The thunder had dragged them back to the darkness they'd once escaped. "It's all right, babies. Just thunder. No one's going to hurt you now." But they didn't hear me. Max let out a low growl. Rex shook violently. I saw it in their eyes, the same haunted look from that stormy night when I cut them free. A chill ran through me. I didn't think. I pulled my old jacket from the closet, the one I'd wrapped them in that night, and sat down on the floor. "Come here," I whispered, opening my arms. At first neither moved. Then Max, still trembling, crawled forward and rested his head on my thigh. Rex followed, quivering, tucking himself beneath the jacket. I pulled it over both of them, keeping my hands firm, letting my warmth spread through the fabric. Another crash of thunder. They flinched, but didn't run. I spoke softly, "Listen to me. We're safe. No more trees. No more ropes. No one's ever going to hurt you again. I promise." Their breathing began to slow. I sat there feeling their tiny hearts beating against my chest, fast at first, then easing, sinking with mine. I didn't know who was comforting whom. I just knew the room grew still and the rain began to soften. I didn't sleep. I stayed there until morning, the jacket still wrapped around the three of us. When daylight crept through the window, Max was fast asleep, and Rex twitched every now and then at the distant echo of thunder. I laid my hand gently on his head, stroking his fur. "It's all right, Rex. Last night's just a dream now." I stepped outside onto the porch. The rain had stopped. The ground shimmered, soaked and glowing with the pale pink of dawn. I took the old rope, the one I'd kept all this time, as proof, and carried it to the backyard. I set it on a pile of dry wood and struck a match. The fire flared to life, golden and crackling, eating through the rope inch by inch. I watched it burn, smoke curling upward in thin gray ribbons before the wind carried it away. "Never again," I whispered, "never." When I turned back, Max and Rex were standing in the doorway, tails wagging, eyes bright under the morning sun. I crouched down, smiling. "All right, my little warriors, let's start over." They ran into the yard, splashing through puddles, their barks ringing out strong, clear, full of life. No longer the cries of fear, but the sound of freedom. And I knew then that storm hadn't only been theirs. It had been mine, too. And that morning, we stepped out of it together. At 7. A month after the storm, the little wooden house on the edge of Millfield wasn't silent anymore. In the mornings, instead of the old radio crackling in the corner, I heard the sound of paws on the floor, sharp barks, and the breathless laughter of two souls who once fell out of this world. Max and Rex were bigger now. Stronger, their black and tan coats gleaming like polished bronze under the sun. They chased each other around the yard before racing back toward me, tails wagging so hard I thought they'd snap. All right, I surrender." I laughed, kneeling down as two wet noses pressed against my cheeks. Dr. Kim still came by every weekend. Every time she saw the scene, she just shook her head and smiled. They picked the right man, Evan. I've never seen dogs recover this fast. "No, Doc," I said quietly. "They're the ones who saved me." She smiled again, saying nothing, but I knew she understood. On the day of the official adoption, I signed the papers with hands that trembled just a little. Under owner's name, I wrote Evan Walker, and under pets, I wrote Max and Rex Walker. That last name, I never thought I'd share it again after losing my family. Yet, as I looked at those two curled up together, I realized family doesn't have to share blood. Sometimes, it's just about surviving the same storm. I brought them home. When I opened the door, the afternoon light poured across the porch. Max ran straight to the corner of the yard where I'd burned the old rope, sniffed around, then barked loud like a victory cry. Rex sat beside me, resting his head on my knee, his brown eyes glowing with a peace I'd never seen before. I placed my hand on their heads and whispered, "We've come a long way. Haven't we, boys? Now, we're home." A week later, Dr. Kim sent me a photo of the three of us in the yard, sunlight gold and soft, their collars gleaming. Beneath it, she'd written the caption, "From victims to survivors, thanks to one man who chose to stop." I posted that picture online with a single line, "Sometimes the ones we save us right back." The post spread everywhere. Strangers wrote thank yous, shared photos of their pets, cried, prayed, and sent love. I read every word and smiled. Then I turned off my phone and stepped out onto the porch. Max lay across the steps, Rex resting his head on my leg. The evening sun was gentle like a living breath. I looked up at the sky and said softly, "If anyone out there can still hear me, please stop. Don't turn away from those small lives, because when you save one life, you're saving your own heart too." Thank you for watching till the end of this story. If you believe every life deserves a chance to live, to be loved, hit subscribe, and join us as we share more true rescue journeys like this one. Every subscription, every share, is another heartbeat saved. See you in the next story.